After all this time, I have to say it clearly. I'm fed up with both the old hag and the brat. Get out. Even though my husband was drunk, it was a terrible thing to say. My granddaughter, Emma, left the room crying. Emma. It was understandable since the drawing she had worked so hard on for her grandfather was discarded right in front of her. We might never be able to go back to how things were. Just as I thought this. The doorbell rang. Who could it be at this hour? Could it be? Margaret, it's been a while. Sarah. Why are you here? I stood there, dumbfounded. Then my husband spoke again. I'm sick of old people like you. What do you mean? You two can't possibly be. My sister Sarah looked down at me with a malicious smile. Margaret. I'm dating your husband. What? That's right. I'm sorry. I'm going to remarry Sarah. I couldn't comprehend the sudden declaration, and I felt cold sweat might break out all over my body. Before I knew it, my hands and feet were trembling. I'm sorry. I'll take your husband, Margaret. Sarah watched me tremble in shock for a while as if it amused her. I couldn't stay like this. I will have my revenge against my husband and sister. This is where my grandchild's and my revenge began. My name is Margaret Hamilton, I'm 60 years old. I live quietly with my recently retired husband, Frank, a little away from the heart of New York in a peaceful residential area. I used to run a flower arrangement class there, making use of my qualifications. It's often said that many couples grow apart after retirement, but it didn't seem to be a problem in our house. Although it was a bit bothersome that my husband started seeking more attention from me than during his working days. At first, I was puzzled, but maybe that was also something fresh and possibly good. He was enjoying his hobbies such as chorus and chess, leisurely, and I genuinely enjoyed interacting with the friends I met in my class. Thus, walking at our own pace into this second phase of life wasn't bad. Just as I started to feel this way, an event that would change our lives occurred. What? Michael had an accident. That can't be. Could it be a mistake? My hand trembled as I held the receiver, my mind going blank. I couldn't believe it. My husband also seemed unable to grasp the situation, standing there in shock. 3 days ago, our son and his family had taken advantage of Labor Day to go on a trip with their daughter, just the three of them. The accident happened on their way back from a beautiful autumnal mountain destination in the north. It was unbelievable. Please, God, let them be safe. Just spare their lives. With a prayerful heart, we hurried from our home to a hospital in the northeastern region. But what we found there were the lifeless bodies of our son and his wife, already cold. It can't be true. No. Michael. Michael, wake up. The cause of the accident was apparently a large truck whose driver had fallen asleep and veered into the oncoming lane. The head-on collision had completely wrecked the car, the front of the vehicle was unrecognizably mangled. Both our son, Michael, and his wife, Erica, were reported to have died almost instantly. Michael, who had been busy every day working tirelessly as a salesperson. Despite the doctor's desperate efforts, neither my son nor his wife could be saved. The cold hospital corridor echoed with our voiceless screams and sobs. Normally strong, my husband cried out loudly this time, overwhelmed by grief. Our only son, Michael, was just 39 years old at the time. The only survivor was our granddaughter, Emma. God has taken our only son from us. The only remaining family member, our granddaughter, Emma, sat in shock, her face pale as if frozen, not moving a muscle. Through the window swayed by the cold autumn wind, heavy rain clouds approached. Before I knew it, the year had turned and it was already February. Half a year had passed since the day that changed everything. In this half year, we managed to get through our son and his wife's funeral and raced through life in a daze, without even time to grieve. And so, we took in our granddaughter, Emma, now an orphan, and started raising her. We, as a couple, were doing our best to get our new life on track. Half a year had passed, but our time seemed to have stopped on that day. While I busily managed household chores and struggled with the unexpected return to parenting, my husband stared blankly out the window. At that moment, I still hadn't realized how much the accident had changed him. That day, when Emma didn't come home on time, I peeked outside through the back door. The outside air was as cold as ice. Was it track and field practice today? Watching my breath condense in the cold air, I was about to close the door when Emma returned. I'm home. Hi, it must have been cold, huh? Come in. Since her parents' death, Emma had closed herself off and barely spoke to us. But recently, she had started to show expressions typical of a middle schooler again. It will still take some time before she regains her true smile. She seemed to be making an effort in her own way. Although it was awkward, Emma was earnestly trying to fit into this new family dynamic. Emma was still 14 years old. She was in her second year of middle school. Losing both parents at once during such a sensitive period and being forced to change schools after being taken in by her grandparents. Emma was facing immense challenges. Thinking about Emma's feelings made my heart feel like it was going to burst. But while I was desperately trying to heal Emma's heart, my husband's remained vacant. Dear, Emma is back. Ah. With that short response, he shifted his gaze back to the television. Just when she's starting to open up to us a little. My husband had always enjoyed drinking, but since Michael's death, it was clear his drinking had increased significantly. It might be unavoidable to overlook certain things, given the heartache of losing our only son. With that thought, I tried to ignore minor issues. But after dinner, Emma briskly cleared the dishes and stood at the sink to help with washing up. Grandma, today my drawing got recognized at school, she said. Really? That's wonderful. It turns out a landscape Emma drew at the end of the year had been selected for the cover of the middle school's centennial commemorative booklet. I'm so happy my artwork is on the cover. It was the first genuine smile Emma had shown us since she came to live with us. Grandpa, listen. Emma, you should focus more on your studies rather than drawing, he interrupted. Dear. It's true, isn't it? Indeed, Emma had never been good at studying. She hadn't failed, but her grades in mathematics and Spanish were dismal at the end-of-year exams. As a result, I had to spend many late nights helping Emma with her studies. Starting parenting over at this stage in our lives was challenging. Even though we were blood-related grandparents, it was never easy. If anything, conflicts seemed more frequent. My husband's attitude towards Emma did not improve afterward. It was as if he was taking out the loss of our son on her, being cold and detached. Since the accident, I had become concerned about my increasingly reclusive and heavy-drinking husband. Late at night, after Emma had gone to sleep, I decided to confront him. What was that attitude towards Emma earlier? What about it? He was still in the kitchen, calling it a nightcap, drinking whiskey. She's finally starting to brighten up a bit, going to school properly, right? So what? Going to school is the least she should be doing. Even so. Saying study more like that. You didn't have to say it like that. What about you? You've been all over Emma lately. She can study on her own, can't she? That child may struggle with studies, but she excels in art and sports. Isn't that enough? Michael was like me, good at both studies and sports. Emma doesn't resemble her father at all. Stop it. No matter what you say, Michael isn't coming back. All we can do now is raise Emma properly. Please, let's cooperate. Look, Margaret. You may not understand, but I had my second life plans. But now. Frank trailed off, unsure of what to say next. Never mind, it's over. Originally, Emma was supposed to be a precious treasure for us. But the death of their son and daughter-in-law cast a dark shadow over the relationship between us and our granddaughter. I quietly went to check on Emma in her room. Sorry, Emma. A single tear rolled down her cheek as she breathed quietly in her sleep. I gently wiped away the tear and silently returned to my bedroom. That night, my husband staggered home drunk very late. Hey, I'm home. Where have you been until this late? Does it matter? It's none of your business. In recent months, under the guise of a stress relief, my husband had been drinking out every night. Naturally, conflicts and arguments within the home had increased. My husband has become like a completely different person lately. He staggered into the living room and sloppily slumped onto the sofa, demanding, "Bring me some water." I handed him a glass of water with a resigned expression. He drank the water greedily and then said something unexpected. "Today, I met your sister at the bar." "What?" "Sarah." I felt an uneasy stirring in my chest. "Sarah and I are sisters, but we have different mothers, we're half-siblings. There's a significant age gap between us. Sarah, the child of my father's second wife, is 13 years younger than me, at 47. Though she is single, she maintains a youthful beauty and is often called a ageless beauty due to her looks. A few years ago, she launched a successful cosmetics brand called Jupiter and even got featured in magazines. While it can't be said that my sister isn't beautiful, she's what you might call an evil woman, using men to climb her way up. Because of this, she's had endless troubles with men since her youth. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a bit envious of her flamboyant social life. Fortunately, my stepmother, who was her biological mother, raised us without favoritism. Maybe that's why I was able to avoid feeling inferior to my stunning sister. It's hard to believe that the cosmetics brand Sarah runs was started with her own funds alone. I always suspected she charmed some wealthy man into becoming her patron and funding it. "Hey, Margaret, have you looked in the mirror lately?" Casually, I glanced at the mirror hanging on the living room wall. Reflected, there was a face far more aged than I had imagined. "Is that me?" I reflexively looked away from the mirror. I couldn't bear to look directly at it. This was the reality. There I was, worn out by childcare, housework, and stress. I felt like I understood what my husband was implying. "Sarah and you are so different. Are you really sisters?" His eyes, slightly mocking and clouded with alcohol, stung me. I was shaking with anger, unable to find the words to respond. "Yes, so what? Just saying, your sister remains beautiful with age, unlike someone." Overwhelmed with intense anger and turmoil, I felt dizzy. Managing to suppress the urge to scream, I slammed the door forcefully and left the room. The painful past of being compared to and belittled next to my sister resurfaced. I never thought I would face such treatment from my husband at this age. I closed the door behind me and quietly let out a sob. "Grandma." Emma must have heard our argument. From then on, the relationship between my husband and me rapidly cooled. Far from showing remorse, he became increasingly arrogant towards Emma and me. His bad drinking habits persisted, and he even began staying out until morning frequently. Frank had his fair share of relationships with women before we married, and it seemed he had dated several others. I was worried, but there was nothing I could do. Lately, he continued to go out drinking nightly, and I no longer tried to caution him about it. He doesn't listen to anything I say anymore. While I had resigned myself to some extent, I still harbored a faint hope he might return to the kind man he once was. I can't be zoning out like this. Startled, I snapped back to the present. "Thank you, Margaret. I appreciate your class today," said one of my flower arrangement students cheerfully as I smiled and saw them to the door. The studio had been closed for a while after my son and his wife died, but upon reopening, the students quickly returned. Now, conversations with my husband, who no longer paid any attention to the family, were virtually non-existent. He barely spoke to Emma either. The room was filled with colorful flowers, and a sweet scent lingered in the air of the classroom. The interaction with my students was my only joy and salvation for my spirit. After everyone had left, I began cleaning up the tools in the now empty classroom. The deep indigo vase was my favorite. It was something my husband had bought for me a long time ago from a glassmaker in Oregon. I picked a deep red rose from the table and stared at it intently. The luxurious rose flower illuminated by the setting sun through the window. Its resplendent appearance reminded me of my sister, whom my husband had recently met. His words crossed my mind again. "Have you looked in the mirror lately? A woman's worth isn't determined solely by her external appearance. But do I have anything that surpasses Sarah now?" "Grandma." I was suddenly brought back to the present by the call. Today was my husband's birthday. I remembered that I had planned to make his favorite steak for dinner. I turned hurriedly to the source of the voice. Emma had drawn something for Frank. "Thank you. I'm sure Grandpa will come home early today." I said, though I tried calling him with no response. It's a special day, and yet. That night, my husband finally came home after 10 p.m. As he passed through the hallway, I could smell alcohol and tobacco on him. He seemed to have been drinking again. "Emma, Grandpa's home," I called out to her. Emma was holding something like a piece of drawing paper. "Happy birthday, Grandpa. I made this drawing for you. Please take it if you like," she said. It was my husband's 65th birthday. This is supposed to be me? Doesn't look like me at all. "Emma, you really do waste your time on useless things," Frank commented, crumpling up the portrait she had drawn and throwing it into the trash. "How could you do that? Emma went to all that trouble to draw it for you," I exclaimed. After all this time, I have to say it clearly. I'm fed up with both the old hag and the brat. Get out. Though he was drunk, those were harsh words. Emma left the scene in tears. "Emma. It might be that we can never go back." Just as I thought this, the doorbell rang. Who could it be at this hour? Could it be Margaret? Long time no see. "Sarah. What are you doing here?" I stood frozen in shock. Then my husband spoke again. "I'm fed up with an old woman like you." "What do you mean? You two can't possibly be." Sarah looked down on me with a malicious smile. "Margaret, I'm dating your husband now," she said. "What did you just say?" "That's the situation." "I'm sorry, but I am going to marry Sarah," my husband declared suddenly. I couldn't comprehend the sudden announcement, and cold sweat seemed to break out all over my body. Before I knew it, my hands and feet were trembling. "I'm sorry, but I'll be taking your husband," Sarah said as she watched me shaking in shock with a sort of amusement. "Sarah, do you understand what you're saying?" "I'm telling the truth," she said with a thin smile as she stood up. "That's the situation. So, I'll leave you for now." That night, I couldn't sleep at all, shocked beyond the ability to even cry. For the first time, I realized that humans can be too shocked to weep. Less than a year after my son, Michael's death, Emma and I were plunged back into despair. 2 months later, my husband, Frank, and I officially divorced. It was an all too abrupt end to our married life. After 37 years of marriage, having wed Frank at the age of 24, the divorce was something I had never anticipated. Afterward, relying on relatives, I took Emma and we left the house. Everything precious seemed to slip through my palms. Overwhelmed by a sense of powerlessness, I sought refuge with my uncle's family. Spring was approaching. The early spring breeze gently swept across the meadows. My uncle's ancestral home was located in a rural area along the mid-Atlantic coast. The water in the surrounding fields warmed up, and fresh green leaves sprouted on the nearby gentle hills. Despite the serene sunshine of the burgeoning spring, my heart remained heavy. I had just learned that Frank and Sarah had officially remarried. "Grandma, what's wrong?" "It's nothing," I replied as I packed Alstroemeria flowers into a basket. I was preparing flowers to be sent to a local fresh market. We were staying with my uncle, Tyler Harper, who owned the home. The Harper family owned several forests and fields in the region and grew flowers for shipment to the metropolitan area. And I had been allowed to work in their flower cultivation fields. The people of the Harper family, including Tyler, his wife, and my cousin's family, were all kind. I love flowers. Working in the fields doesn't bother me at all. But, Emma, I'm sorry we had to move so often, I said. This was the second time Emma had to move schools since her parents' accident. "I'm sorry about Grandpa, but I think it's better this way," she reassured me. This region was warm and comfortable to live in. Close to both the sea and mountains, the scenic beauty of the area surprisingly appealed to Emma. She became more active in painting than ever, joined the art extracurricular activities at her new school, and started attending painting classes. Although I plan to eventually reopen my flower arrangement classes and establish myself independently. From the death of my son and his wife, to my husband's infidelity, the discord with my sister, and then the divorce. So much had happened in quick succession, and I still hadn't managed to sort it all out within myself. Grandma, there's something I want to talk to you about, Emma said. What is it? About Sarah. Look at this. She showed me her phone screen. Sarah. I furrowed my brows. Looking at the LCD screen, I saw several familiar names flashing. This is... The name Sarah Harper and the company she runs, Jupiter Cosmetics, were mentioned. It was reported that the face wash sold by Jupiter Cosmetics contained fraudulent ingredients. The products from Jupiter contained ingredients that, though now strictly regulated in terms of allowable amounts, were used far beyond the legal limits. Many people developed severe allergic reactions, with their faces swelling or even experiencing anaphylactic shocks. The information posted on the internet quickly spread far and wide. Emma seemed to have noticed it through a retweet from a friend who used these cosmetics. Sarah is probably going to face a lot of trouble now. Grandpa too. Yes. They might come to you for help. It's okay, Emma. You don't have to worry about that. Those people are now leading lives that have nothing to do with us anymore. Yeah, I understand. I made up my mind firmly. A few days later, Sarah's company's scandal was already being reported on TV. According to the news, there were about 300 victims, and a group of lawyers was demanding compensation in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Margaret, when your own sister is on the news like that, you must be restless. I've already caused so much trouble for you with Sarah and Frank's issues. We should have nothing to do with those kids anymore. They are a disgrace to the Harper family. Yes. And who knows what kind of bad luck they might bring in the future. Tyler made sure that Sarah and the others would not come near the main house, instructing all household members to be cautious. There was no way he could feel good about Sarah, who had snatched away her own sister's husband and then caused a national scandal. My feelings were complex. My mind was uneasy and restless. But my fears were soon realized. A few days later, I received a call from an unregistered number. Hello, Margaret? Shockingly, it wasn't Sarah, but my ex-husband who called. What do you want now? Don't be so cold. I need a favor. No. Just hear me out. I officially registered my marriage with Sarah recently. And I also took on a director's role at a Jupiter. Then this mess happened. So, what about it? I need you to lend me some money. Your father was quite wealthy, wasn't he? Didn't he leave you a hefty inheritance when he passed away? Are you kidding me? After everything, you're going to drain my father's inheritance too? Don't ever contact me again. The audacity of a man who had abandoned his family for his wife's sister, now trying to tap into his ex-wife's inheritance. I was seething with rage. I struggled to keep my composure so that Emma wouldn't notice. Grandma, I'm home. Emma had returned home. Perhaps there was track practice today. Under the early summer sun, Emma's face was slightly sunburned. What's wrong? What do you mean, what's wrong? Because, Grandma, you're crying. Startled, I touched my face and realized that several tears were streaming down my cheeks. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, Emma. I didn't mean to involve you in this, really I'm sorry. Unable to stop the tears, I covered my face with my hands and sobbed. Then a gentle hand landed on my head. It was Emma's hand. Grandma, don't cry. I could see Emma looking into my face with concern. The dark emotions I had been suppressing all this time suddenly overflowed and couldn't be stopped. During that time, Emma kept patting my head, comforting me with a there. Grandma, you've done nothing wrong. I couldn't reply. Is that really true? If only I had paid more attention to my husband after Michael passed away. If only I had been more empathetic towards him. If only Michael and his group hadn't met with that accident. Would our fate have changed? But now, everything was irretrievably lost. Grandma, let's be happy together. Can we really be happy? If you wish for it, surely we can. Yes, you're right. I'll be with you, so it's going to be all right. Ah, my sweetheart. I burst into tears of laughter. It was then that I truly felt grateful from the bottom of my heart that Emma had survived. That night, I made a decision. I decided to finally demand child support from Frank. Emma, I need to talk to you about something. What is it? I'm thinking of starting a flower arrangement class again. What do you think? Emma's face brightened up instantly. I think that's great. I totally agree. I believed that securing a substantial amount of money was absolutely necessary to properly raise Emma. Emma happily accepted the suggestion with a smile. The Harper family members are all kind. I never felt uncomfortable here, but I was beginning to think about starting a new life just with Emma. Taking care of the many beautiful flowers in this floral nursery deepened my love for them. Flower arrangement was one of the hobbies that my and Sarah's mother had made us learn. Sarah gave up halfway, but I loved flowers, so I continued. A few weeks later, Sarah called us. Margaret, what's this about? You demand child support from Frank out of the blue? There's nothing much to it. It's simply my right, considering what I've endured from you guys. You're the one to be blamed because you got your husband stolen. It's not my fault. You always say things that don't add up. That's why I hate you. You always act like you're the wise and good one, always liked by everyone. I hate that about you. You felt that way? I was surprised. You always had people around you, cherished by Dad and Mom. You could never understand how I felt. Sarah. You know, right? My company is finished now. We've been sued by a group of victims, and the damages have skyrocketed to hundreds of thousands of dollars. And now, on top of that, you demand child support from Frank? Don't joke with us. Sarah. I've always felt inferior to you as well. We were the same. It's sad that I only realize it now. But I can't back down this time. It's also for Frank's sake. Michael, please watch over us from heaven. I promise to raise your daughter well. Reconciling with my sister and ex-husband during their lifetimes might be difficult. But that's all right. I've decided to live by my own beliefs. I am determined to find happiness with Emma. The following week, surprisingly, 2 pieces of good news arrived from school. First, Emma had achieved great results in track and field, qualifying for the national championships in hurdles. And the other was, really? You're painting? Yes. Grandma, I get to go to the Netherlands. At first, I couldn't believe my ears. Emma's painting had won a competition. Emma had entered a summer painting contest organized by a leading domestic art supply company. Her painting won the grand prize and would be exhibited in a prestigious museum in the Netherlands for a limited time. In addition to the prize money, travel and accommodation expenses were provided. This news was published on the cultural page of the newspaper, and it caught Frank's attention. Soon after, a call came to us again. Hello, is that Emma? It's been a while. How are you doing? I'm fine. I saw the newspaper. It's amazing, winning such an award. Make sure to show it to Mayor too. I can't show it to you. It's going to be displayed overseas. I heard there was also some prize money. Could you get your grandma? There's something I'd like to discuss. I can't do that. Grandma said she absolutely won't give you the prize money. Anne. I'm not really concerned about the prize money. The truth was, Frank had unexpectedly visited us a few days earlier, attempting to reconcile with me. Given the timing, it was not unreasonable to suspect he was after the prize money. I had no intention whatsoever of getting back together with him. By this time, he was completely devastated and worn out. The financial losses from Sarah's cosmetics business, compensation for a class action lawsuit, and child support for Emma had driven them nearly insane. Or perhaps they had already lost their minds. Sarah's beauty had faded, and she looked much older than her age. No longer concerned about appearances or makeup, she was on the brink of madness. The affair that had stolen her sister's husband had exacted a higher toll than imagined. After scrambling for money, they ended up hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. Frank and Sarah were both physically and mentally exhausted. Their marriage had been troubled from the start and was now on the verge of collapse. If I had known it would come to this, I would never have married you. You're useless. What did you say? It was you who seduced me first. I'm the one who was deceived. Give me back my life. At that moment, Frank realized that Sarah had never really loved him. Aware that her cosmetics business was faltering, Sarah had quickly remarried to find a host she could leech off. He finally understood that she had manipulated him and used him completely. And he also realized that this affair had also been part of her revenge against me. But now, it was all too late. Money, home, family, love. And even memories. Except for one thing, a new wife who had become reckless and was on the verge of madness. Later, I heard through the grapevine that Frank and Sarah had started working at a hotel in the far north, living in. During his prime, he had held a respectable position. And Sarah, formerly the head of a cosmetics company, must have been struggling greatly in her new environment. But now, my life was free from those two. I have no desire to interfere now, nor do I want any from them. There was just one thing that nagged at me. The hotel was very close to the last place Michael and his family visited before the accident. The leaves must be at their peak color now. Perhaps that person, for Michael's memorial? It was just speculation. But Michael was our irreplaceable only son. That much was true. Looking back, it all started with that accident. No one to blame, no one could be blamed. It was just a painful memory filled with regret and sorrow. Thus, I silently bid farewell in my heart to my ex-husband and sister who had betrayed me. And as the seasons turned, we faced the second spring since the accident. With the funds we had gathered, Emma and I bought a house not far from the Harper family, starting our new life. We moved close enough so Emma wouldn't have to transfer schools, not far from my uncle's house. There, I finally restarted the flower arrangement class. It was near the station and in a good location. The flyer Emma designed for, now recruiting students, was well received, and many students quickly gathered. Grandma, the painting displayed in the museum has returned. In Emma's hands was a painting of Michael, his wife, Erica, and Emma herself gazing at a field of flowers illuminated by the sunset. No matter how many times I look at it, it's a beautiful painting. I'm sure Michael and Erica are also happy. Yeah, I think so too. We smiled at each other. What do you think about displaying this painting in the flower arrangement class for a while? Of course. Actually, Emma's painting was set to be donated to the municipal museum afterward. But wanting to make me happy, Emma readily agreed to her request. Grandma, you know. Yes? I'm not angry at Grandpa and the others anymore. Is that okay? Initially, I was taken aback by her sudden declaration. But at the same time, I resonated with Emma's thoughts. You can do as you like, Emma. Okay. Whatever feelings you have, they are yours, and who you forgive or don't forgive is up to you. Thank you. Yes, those two had already received a punishment commensurate with their deeds. I, too, should be free. I'm only 62 years old. Life is still ahead of me. Above our heads, the future was shining bright.